My family told me I lost the art scholarship that would have changed my life. 20 years later, I found the acceptance letter hidden in my brother's office. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I just started painting. 3 months after that, at my parents' 40th anniversary party, surrounded by 50 of our closest friends and relatives, I unveiled my gift. It wasn't a landscape. It was a confession. And by the time I was done, the entire foundation of our family had crumbled to dust. But that night, as I stood there watching the color drain from my brother's face, I wasn't thinking about the fallout. I was thinking about the smell of turpentine and the weight of a 20-year-old lie, and how sometimes the only way to heal a wound is to expose it to the light, no matter how much it burns. It began, as these things often do, with a quiet, simmering injustice. A death by 1,000 paper cuts. I'm a graphic designer for a mid-level insurance company. I create soul-crushingly dull infographics about liability coverage and design logos for corporate wellness programs that nobody uses. It pays the bills. It keeps my daughter, Lily, in snacks and soccer cleats. But it's not me. The real me lives in a small, cramped studio I converted from a sunroom, surrounded by the scent of oil paints and the ghosts of canvases I never finished. The real me is a painter. Or she was supposed to be. My daughter, Lily, she's the real deal. At 9 years old, she draws with a confidence and perspective that I only dreamed of at her age. Her sketchbooks are filled with mythical creatures, expressive portraits of our cat, and fantastical landscapes. She has the gift, my gift, amplified. And that, I've come to realize, is what terrifies my family the most. The tension had been building for months, centered around my parents' upcoming 40th wedding anniversary. My older brother, Mark, the golden child, the successful corporate lawyer, was in charge of the whole affair. He's the kind of man who wears a suit on a Saturday and uses words like synergy in casual conversation. To him, my art has always been a cute hobby, something to be indulged, like a child's insistence on wearing a cape to the grocery store, but never to be taken seriously. "Clara, great news," he'd said on the phone a few weeks back, his voice dripping with condescending cheerfulness. "We've commissioned a portrait for Mom and Dad's anniversary. A real artist. He's done senators, CEOs. It's going to be the centerpiece of the party. A real artist." The words hung in the air between us, unspoken but sharp. As opposed to you, the fake one. I just said, "That's nice, Mark." What else could I say? He continued, oblivious. "And hey, we were thinking you could design the invitations. You're so good with that computer stuff." He wanted me to use my soul-sucking day job skills to create the prelude to an event celebrating a piece of art made by a real artist. A position I was implicitly told I could never occupy. It was a perfect, bite-sized summary of my entire life within that family. Useful, but not valuable. Practical, but not celebrated. I swallowed my pride and said yes. For my parents. For the sake of peace. I spent a week designing elegant, beautiful invitations that felt like a betrayal to my own soul. Meanwhile, Lily was buzzing about the city's annual youth art showcase. The deadline was approaching, and she was meticulously working on a charcoal drawing of an old gnarled tree in the park. "Do you think Grandma and Grandpa will come see it if I get in?" she asked, her eyes wide with hope. "Of course, sweetie," I lied, knowing they'd find some excuse. A golf tournament. A prior commitment with Mark's perfectly well-behaved, non-artistic children. They saw Lily's talent not as a gift to be nurtured, but as a dangerous echo of my own failed ambitions. They didn't want another dreamer in the family. One was quite enough. The simmering pot was about to boil over. I just didn't know the catalyst would be a simple mistake and a trip to my brother's house. The lie revealed itself on a Tuesday. It was pure chaos. Mark called me in a panic. Clara. Disaster. I left the box with the invitations at the office, and the courier service lost them. The party is in 10 days. I need more like yesterday. He was practically hyperventilating. Can you please come over and print them out on my color laser printer? It's better than yours. We need them perfect. I sighed. My evening plans of painting and helping Lily with her art project dissolving into another rescue mission for my highly competent older brother. But I agreed. An hour later, I was in his sterile, immaculate home office. It looked like a catalog for a store called Success. Mahogany desk, leather chair, awards on the wall. He was frantically on the phone, so he just waved me towards the printer and a cabinet. Paper should be in there. Top shelf, the good cardstock. I opened the heavy oak cabinet. It was obsessively organized. Reams of paper, labeled boxes of office supplies. No cardstock on the top shelf. I scanned the lower shelves, moving aside a box of old tax returns from 2004, then another labeled college memorabilia. Behind it, tucked away in the deepest corner, was a dusty, unassuming banker's box, simply marked Clara. My breath caught in my throat. Why would he have a box with my name on it? Curiosity, a cold, creeping premonition, took over. My hands were trembling as I pulled it out and lifted the lid. Inside was a collection of my old things. A few high school report cards, a dried corsage from a prom I barely remembered, and a thick, yellowed manila envelope. It was addressed to me, in my maiden name. The return address was a crest I knew better than my own reflection. The Beaumont Institute of Fine Arts. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had applied there for their most prestigious scholarship. My one and only shot at a real art education. My parents had told me I'd been rejected. They sat me down at the kitchen table, their faces masks of gentle pity. "We're so sorry, sweetheart," my mother had said. "There were so many applicants. But don't worry. You'll find a more stable path." I remembered crying myself to sleep that night, the dream I'd staked my entire identity on turning to ash. Now, here was the letter. The envelope was thick, heavy, too heavy for a rejection. With shaking fingers, I broke the seal, which had been carefully slit open, and then resealed with a tiny piece of tape at the back. I pulled out the contents. The first page was a letter. "Dear Miss Clara Jensen," it began. "On behalf of the admissions committee, it is with immense pleasure that we offer you a place in the incoming freshman class and award you the full 4-year Beaumont Presidential Scholarship for Artistic Excellence." Full scholarship. 4 years. I read the words over and over, but they wouldn't compute. They were from a different timeline, a different life. Behind the letter was a second folded piece of paper, a handwritten note on my father's corporate letterhead. It was a draft, full of crossed-out words. It was a letter to the Institute, written by him. "To the admissions board," it said. We thank you for the generous offer to our daughter, Clara. However, after much family discussion, she has decided to decline the scholarship and pursue a more practical career path. We wish the opportunity could go to another deserving student. They hadn't just lied. They had intercepted it. They had accepted on my behalf, and then they had declined on my behalf. They hadn't just told me the door was closed. They had locked it, thrown away the key, and told me it was my own choice. I sank to the floor, the letter clutched in my hand, the air sucked from my lungs. I didn't make a sound. Mark was still on the phone in the other room, talking about leverage and quarterly reports. He had no idea that a 20-year-old crime scene had just been discovered in his own office. In that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It hardened. The grief and confusion were instantly replaced by a cold, clear, diamond-hard resolve. I slipped the letter back into its envelope, tucked it into my purse, printed his stupid invitations, and walked out of that house. The rescue mission was over. A war was about to begin. This wasn't the first time. The scholarship was the grand finale, the magnum opus of their lifelong campaign of quiet sabotage. But the pattern was there, all along. Driving home from Mark's, the 20-year-old letter a lead weight in my bag, my life replayed in my mind not as a series of events, but as a collection of evidence. I was the family's resident dreamer, a role they assigned me early on. It sounded whimsical, romantic, but it was a cage. Dreamers, in my family's lexicon, were unreliable, impractical, and ultimately, a liability. Mark was the achiever. His path was paved with parental approval, tutors, and unwavering financial support for every debate tournament and summer internship. My path was a dirt trail I had to clear myself, with them occasionally tossing a branch in my way and calling it a lesson in resilience. I remembered being 10 years old, proudly showing my dad a detailed pencil sketch of our house. He glanced at it, nodded, and said, "That's nice, honey. Did you finish your math homework?" Mark got an A on his algebra test. The message was clear. His achievements were real, measurable, important. Mine were nice. When I was in high school, I needed a specific set of professional-grade oil paints for an advanced art class. The kit cost $200. I watched my parents write a check for $500 for Mark's spot at a leadership conference, without blinking an eye. For my paints, there was a week-long debate. "Is this really necessary, Clara?" my mother asked, sighing. "It's such an expensive hobby." A hobby. Even when it was my best subject, the one thing I excelled at, it was never treated as a legitimate pursuit. It was a frivolous expense. His ambition was an investment. Mine was a luxury they couldn't quite afford. The college application process was the culmination of it all. Mark was accepted into a prestigious law school, and my parents threw a party. They bought him a new laptop and a set of engraved briefcases. He was a success story before he'd even attended a single class. I, on the other hand, had pinned all my hopes on the Beaumont scholarship. It was my only way out. My only path to a life where my talent would be seen as a strength, not a weakness. When they told me I'd been rejected, their sympathy felt rehearsed. "It's for the best," my father had said, patting my shoulder. "The life of an artist is a struggle. We just want you to be secure." My mother added, "Now you can focus on something sensible, like graphic design. You're so good with computers." They had already picked out my consolation prize. They steered me toward a community college program, framing it as a practical, smart choice. They weren't saving me from a life of struggle. They were sentencing me to a life of mediocrity because my dream was inconvenient. It didn't fit their narrative of what a successful family looked like. A lawyer's son and a daughter who designed brochures was a much neater story, and now they were doing it to Lily. Last Christmas, Mark gave his son a top-of-the-line coding kit. He gave Lily a set of glitter glue and construction paper. "Something to keep her busy." He'd winked at me. He didn't see the sketchbook she carried everywhere, the charcoal smudges that were permanently on her fingers. He saw a hobby, just like they saw mine. When Lily won first place at her school's art fair, my parents' praise was faint. "Oh, that's lovely, dear." 5 minutes later, they spent 20 minutes on the phone with Mark, dissecting every moment of his son's soccer game. Lily noticed. She'd looked up at me and said, "They like soccer more than drawing, don't they?" That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just about me anymore. They weren't just disrespecting my past. They were actively trying to erase my daughter's future. They were trying to create another me. A person who puts their dreams away in a dusty box in the back of a cabinet. The letter in my purse wasn't just an artifact of a past betrayal. It was a warning for the future. And I would not let history repeat itself. I would not let them turn my daughter's fire into embers. I was going to burn their tidy little world to the ground, and I was going to use my art to light the match. The first person I confronted was my mother. Not with anger, but with a question. I went over for coffee 2 days after finding the letter. She was in her kitchen, humming, the picture of domestic bliss. I let her pour the coffee, let her ask about work. Then I placed the thick, yellowed envelope on the table between us. She froze. Her eyes darted from the Beaumont Institute crest to my face. The hum died in her throat. "I found this at Mark's house," I said, my voice unnaturally calm. She stared at it, her face a blank canvas. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You told me I was rejected," I continued, pushing the envelope a little closer to her. "You said it was for the best. You said it was a more stable path." Her composure started to crack, a faint tremor in her hand. "Clara, this was so long ago. You're twisting things." "Am I?" I opened the envelope and took out the acceptance letter and the handwritten draft from my father. I laid them side by side. A full 4-year scholarship, and a letter from Dad, declining it on my behalf. Tell me, Mom, which part of this am I twisting? The silence was deafening. She wouldn't look at the papers. She wouldn't look at me. Finally she spoke, her voice a reedy whisper. "We did it to protect you." "Protect me?" The calm I was holding onto started to fray. "You didn't protect me. You sabotaged me. You stole my entire future because it didn't fit your plan. The life of an artist is filled with poverty and disappointment," she said, her voice rising, finding its strength in self-righteousness. "We wanted you to be happy, to be secure. Mark is secure. He has a beautiful house, a wonderful family. And I have a job I hate and a studio full of unfinished paintings Because you taught me that my dreams were worthless." I wasn't shouting, but my voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "You didn't do it to protect me. You did it because you were embarrassed. You couldn't brag about a daughter who was a painter. It wasn't as good as a son who was a lawyer." She flinched, and I knew I'd hit the nerve. There was no apology, just justification. "You need to let this go. It was for the best. You have Lily now. You have a good life." "I have the life you chose for me," I said, standing up. "And that ends now." I left her there, sitting at her kitchen table with the evidence of her betrayal laid out before her. Next was my father. He was harder. He was a master of denial. I met him at his office, a place where he was king. I laid out the letters again. He looked at them, then leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. "It was a judgment call, Clara," he said, his tone infuriatingly reasonable. "Your mother and I discussed it. You were emotional. You weren't thinking clearly about your future." "I was 18, I said. "I was supposed to be emotional. I was supposed to have a future that I chose." "And we chose a better one for you," he said, without a trace of remorse. "We guided you. That's what parents do. You should be thanking us. Look at where Mark is. That's because we guided him. You didn't guide me, Dad. You lied to me. You forged my name on a life decision. Was Mark's path paved with lies? He had the gall to look offended. That's different. His ambitions were realistic. That was it. That was the heart of it all. Realistic. My dream wasn't real enough for them. I stood up. "I'm not the person you think I am," I said, "and I'm about to prove it to you." The final confrontation was with Mark. We met at a neutral coffee shop. He was already defensive. Mom and Dad had clearly prepped him. "Look, Clara," he began before I could even speak. "I know you're upset. I was just a kid then. I didn't know all the details. You had a box with my name on it hidden in your office for 20 years, Mark. Don't tell me you didn't know." His face flushed. "Okay, I knew, but I agreed with them. It was the right decision. You would have been a starving artist, Clara. You would have come crawling back to them for money in 5 years. They saved you from that humiliation." The arrogance, the absolute certainty that he knew what was best for me, was staggering. "So you all decided my fate in a secret meeting. The family committee for Clara's future." "It wasn't like that," he stammered. "It was out of love." "Love doesn't look like this, Mark," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Love doesn't build a cage and call it a home. You didn't just agree with them. You benefited from it. With me out of the way, the unreliable artist, all the focus, all the resources went to you. You weren't just a bystander. You were an accomplice." He had no answer to that. He just stared into his coffee. "The anniversary party is in a week," I said, getting up to leave. "I'm still coming. And I'm bringing a gift." He looked up, a flicker of fear in his eyes. "Clara, don't make a scene." I smiled, a real smile for the first time in days. It felt like baring my teeth. "A scene?" I said. "Oh, Mark, I'm not going to make a scene. I'm going to create a masterpiece." After the confrontations, I didn't retreat. I worked. I barricaded myself in my studio. For the first time in years, the insurance infographics and corporate logos ceased to exist. My world shrank to the smell of linseed oil, the scrape of the palette knife, and the stark white of a massive 6-by-8-foot canvas. I was going to paint them a family portrait, the one they deserved. I worked with a feverish intensity I hadn't felt since I was a teenager, fueled by 2 decades of repressed anger and grief. This wasn't just paint on a canvas. It was an exorcism. I didn't work from a photograph. I worked from memory, from the truth that had been buried for so long. My father, not as the benevolent patriarch, but as I saw him in my mind, standing tall, but with his eyes fixed on a distant, invisible stock ticker, his back slightly turned to the rest of the family. My mother, next to him, not smiling, but with an expression of anxious, tight-lipped concern, her hands nervously ringing a string of pearls, her gaze focused solely on Mark. And Mark. I painted him in the center, slightly forward, bathed in a golden light that didn't touch anyone else. His expression was one of smooth, confident satisfaction, a faint, smug smile on his lips. He was the sun around which the rest of them orbited. And then I painted myself. Or rather, the ghost of myself. In the background, behind the main group, I painted a faint, almost translucent figure of an 18-year-old girl. She was standing in the shadows, her face obscured, but in her hands she was holding a single, thick, sealed envelope with the Beaumont crest just visible. The portrait was brutal. It was honest. It was all the things our family was not. As I painted, something shifted in me. The rage began to cool, replaced by a profound, aching clarity. I wasn't just painting their lies. I was painting my liberation. Meanwhile, Lily was my anchor to the present. She would come into the studio, her own sketchbook in hand, and sit quietly, drawing while I worked. She didn't ask what I was painting. She seemed to understand, on some intuitive level, that this was sacred. "Mom," she said one afternoon, looking up from her drawing of a phoenix. "The youth art showcase is the same day as Grandma and Grandpa's party." My heart clenched. Of course it was. "I know, sweetie," I said, my brush pausing mid-stroke. "And that's okay. We're going to your showcase first. We'll drop off your painting, see it hung up, and then we'll go to the party." "But what if I win?" she asked, her voice small. "Then we'll celebrate you," I said, meeting her eyes with a certainty I'd never felt before. Loudly, no matter what. The day of the party, I felt a strange calm. I carefully wrapped the massive canvas in brown paper. Lily and I went to the community center for the showcase. Her charcoal drawing of the gnarled tree looked incredible, hanging on the wall among the other pieces. It had a soul, a presence. I was so proud my chest ached. As we were leaving, the coordinator stopped us. "Clara Jensen, your daughter, Lily. She won the grand prize for her age group." Lily's face exploded into a supernova of joy. I swept her up in a hug, tears blurring my vision. This was real. This was happening. My daughter, the grand prize winner. I called my parents from the car. "We're on our way," I said. "And I have incredible news. Lily won the grand prize at the art showcase." There was a beat of silence on the other end. Then, my mother's voice, strained. "Oh, that's nice, dear. Well, hurry up. Everyone is waiting. The photographer for the commissioned portrait is here." Click. She hung up. It wasn't nice. It wasn't lovely. It was a distraction from the main event. In that moment, I knew I was doing the right thing. It was time for my gift. We arrived at the restaurant. The private room was filled with flowers, champagne, and 50 smiling faces. The commissioned portrait was on an easel, draped in a silk cloth. It was technically perfect and emotionally dead. My parents looked like wax figures. Mark stood beside it, glowing with pride. He gave speeches, people applauded. Then he announced, "And now my parents will say a few words." My father cleared his throat, thanked everyone, and then said, "We are so blessed. Our greatest achievement is our family. Our wonderful son, Mark, who has made us so proud, and our daughter, Clara." He smiled vaguely in my direction. "And we are so thrilled to unveil this beautiful portrait, a symbol of our legacy." They pulled the cloth away. Polite applause rippled through the room. It was exactly what they wanted. A perfect, sterile lie on a canvas. They posed for photos. The family united. Then, before anyone could move on, I stepped forward. "I have a gift, too," I said, my voice clear and steady. All eyes turned to me. I had 2 of the waiters help me bring in the large paper-wrapped canvas and set it on a second easel next to the first one. A nervous murmur went through the crowd. Mark shot me a panicked look. My mother's smile was frozen on her face. "For your 40th anniversary," I said, looking directly at my parents. "I wanted to give you something real, something honest, a family portrait that tells the whole story." And with that, I tore the paper away. The silence was absolute. It was so total, I could hear the fizz of the champagne in someone's glass. No one applauded. They just stared. They saw it. They saw the turned back, the anxious pearls, the smug smile, the golden light that only shone on one child. They saw the ghost in the background, clutching her stolen future. I let the silence hang for a long moment. Then I spoke. "This is our family," I said, my voice resonating in the quiet room. "A family that decides which child's dreams are realistic and which are a hobby. A family that values success over truth." I reached into my purse and pulled out the old yellowed envelope. 20 years ago, the Beaumont Institute offered me a full scholarship. My parents and my brother decided, without my knowledge, that I should decline it. They told me I was rejected. They chose a safer path for me. I held up the letter. "This is the acceptance letter they hid from me. The ghost in that painting, that was me. That was the artist I was supposed to be, before my own family decided I wasn't good enough." The room erupted, not in shouts, but in a tidal wave of whispers. People turned to look at my parents, at Mark. Their faces were ashen. My mother looked like she was going to be sick. My father was staring at the painting, his jaw slack. Mark was bright red, a mixture of fury and humiliation. My aunt, my father's sister, was the first to speak. "Is this true, Howard?" she demanded, her voice shaking with disbelief. My father couldn't answer. "We were trying to protect her," my mother finally wailed, the excuse sounding pathetic and hollow in the face of the painted evidence. Mark stepped towards me, his voice a low growl. How could you do this? You've ruined everything." "No, Mark," I said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I haven't ruined anything. I've just revealed what was already broken. You can't build a legacy on a foundation of lies." The party was over. People started leaving, avoiding eye contact with my parents, murmuring quiet, horrified apologies to me as they passed. Some cousins came up, hugged me, and whispered, "We always wondered. We're so sorry, Clara." The family didn't just crack. It shattered. I hadn't just unveiled a painting. I had unveiled a truth that could never be unseen. I took Lily's hand, and we walked out, leaving my parents and my brother standing alone in the wreckage of their perfect party, staring at two portraits, the lie they had bought and the truth I had made them own. In the aftermath, the silence from my core family was deafening. No calls, no texts, no apologies. Just a thick, heavy blanket of ostracization. But the silence was filled by other voices. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years reached out, sharing their own stories of feeling sidelined by my parents' favoritism toward Mark. My aunt called to say she was disgusted and was on my side completely. The family wasn't destroyed. It was realigning, like tectonic plates shifting after an earthquake, finding a new, more honest geography. The biggest change, however, was in me. That night, I didn't just expose a lie. I reclaimed my own identity. I went home, took all the bland corporate design work off my studio walls, and replaced it with my own sketches. I started painting again, not with anger, but with a fierce, unapologetic joy. The most important consequence, though, was for Lily. A week after the party, a reporter from the local paper called, wanting to do a feature on the Youth Art Showcase winner. When she came to our house for the interview, she saw my anniversary portrait, which was now leaning against my studio wall. She was captivated. The story she ended up writing wasn't just about a talented 9-year-old. It was about 3 generations of artists in one family. The grandmother who painted in secret, the mother whose dream was deferred, and the daughter who was finally breaking the cycle. The article, titled "A Portrait of Truth," went viral in our small city. A local gallery owner read it and called me. She wanted to see more of my work. 3 months after that disastrous anniversary party, I had my first solo gallery show. I titled it "The Beaumont Letters." On opening night, the gallery was packed. I sold 5 paintings, including the infamous family portrait, to a collector who called it a masterpiece of emotional honesty. My parents and Mark didn't come. I knew they wouldn't. But as I stood there, surrounded by my art, my friends, and the family who had chosen to stand with me, I saw Lily looking at me. Her eyes were shining with a kind of pride I'd never seen before. She wasn't just looking at her mom. She was looking at an artist, a real one. The ending isn't neat. The wound with my parents and brother may never fully heal. They chose their narrative, and I chose mine. But what I created from the wreckage is something stronger and more beautiful. I didn't get the life I was supposed to have at 18, but I'm building an even better one at 38. And my daughter will never have to find her dreams hidden in a dusty box. Her future is hanging on a gallery wall, shining in the light for the whole world to see. The greatest lesson in all of this isn't about revenge. It's about reclamation. For 20 years, I believed the story they told me about myself, that I wasn't good enough, that my dreams were impractical, that my art was just a hobby. Their lie became my truth. A cage I didn't even realize I was locked in. The real betrayal wasn't the hidden letter. It was the theft of my own belief in myself. It's a quiet, insidious kind of damage that can shape a person's entire life. But what I learned is that it's never too late to pick up the brush. It's never too late to paint over the false narrative someone else has created for you and create your own. The truth might be terrifying, and it might burn down the world you thought you knew. But on the other side of that fire, you might just find your real self waiting. Don't ever let someone else tell you the story of who you are. Your life is your canvas. Make it a masterpiece, even if you have to start late. So, what do you think? Was the truth portrait an act of righteous justice, or did I go too far by exposing my family in such a public way? Was there another way? I've gone over it 1,000 times in my head, and I still land here. But I'd love to know what you would have done. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. Your support means the world, and it helps me continue to share these stories. Thank you for listening.